Welcome to Nightshade's Paintbrush. Today we're going to paint up some Stormcast Eternal Retributors for my Celestial Vindicators army. Hello everybody, and welcome back for another tutorial. We're going to start this again with Sotek Green. I did base coat that with Sotek Green. I'm going to finish it up right there. These are Retributors, and for my Celestial Vindicators army, I love the theme of Celestial Vindicators. It's vengeful, the hate-fueled, and hurricane blades. That's right. So it really reminds me of Ghost Rider. I love that. Alright, so Sotek Green, it's going to go applied very evenly throughout. And just for that basing, so we can build upon that and get some highlights and get some shadows. Alright, so next up, what we're going to do is we're going to use Temple Blue just to get a mid-tone right there and bring up some hot spots. You see how it just starts burning hot? That's great, burning hot like the hate-filled of Celestial Vindicators right there. Celestial Vindicators are actually vengeance incarnate, so you want to think that. So if somebody wronged you, these are the people that are definitely going to come down. They're so cool. Their hearts burn with amenity for chaos that knows no bound whatsoever. There is no restriction on how much they hate chaos. And I really do not like Khorne personally, so like this is why I chose this kind of army. It's like there's so many things about it that I just resonates with me. Alright, so next up we're going to do some sky blue from Valleje Model Layer. This time I left the Temple Blue in the pot, like I just dumped it out as best as I could and I left it where it was in. I didn't clean it out. And then I put some that sky blue from Valleje Model Color just to get some extreme highlights. And you can see it blending both of those two together really does a wonderful job when you paint in the miniature. Actually having residual paint in your cup actually blends the paint in with the paint scheme, so it looks a lot smoother. So thinking about witnessing them in battle, right? It's like a hurricane of razored sigmarite beaks upon the foe, like nothing is left alive. For these bladesmen value neither mercy nor restraint. They have no mercy or restraint. They just go at it no matter what. And yeah, and now you want to think they're actually close to Khorne because they have so much devastation in their wake. But what they're doing is eliminating evil. Alright, so time for some Drakenhof Nightshade, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how to do the panel lines. First I do the clothing material between the armor pieces, and the Drakenhof Nightshade really does help darken up those pieces right there, and really makes it come alive, so to speak, when it comes to building up those layers. And you can see there, just really coming in its own and really differentiating the armor panels from the actual piece itself. And I think it's actually really cool that you could actually just use a shade to differentiate the armor from that, and it's so simple to do. It's really simple to do. You can just use the Drakenhof Nightshade just to shade down just the areas that you want. I also use this in a lot of different applications when it comes to my Stormcast Eternal Celestial Vindicators. And what I mean by this is that not only do I just darken off, and I show you how I darken off the clothing area, I also try to darken off panel lines and shadows with the same color, so shadows themselves. But I'm restricting where I want the shade to pool. It's very little, it's very controlled, putting the shadows exactly where I want them. And that's what needs to happen when you're shading down your miniature. You want to have control over where your shadows are going to be and control where you put the highlight. It's all about control. It's why we water down our paints. When you water down your paint, you have to do it in more layers, but it's more forgiving. And you need forgiving when you're working on something small. Although these are not small, not by my Space Marines standard. These are actually quite big. Some pale burnt metal is next, and I'm going for the hammer. Now you can do this any other color you want. This is how I did mine. I went with a very, very light and bright metallic color, and then I just built it up very, very slowly over there so it could come out nice and smooth. I didn't want to oversaturate, and it's really easy to oversaturate your metallic paints. And you can just go in there with metallic paints, and before you know, you're clogging up details. So be very, very careful when building up your metallic paints. Take your time. This is the entire process of building this up to making it look cool is the enjoyable part, you know? You're actually making it look cool, and you did it. You're the one who made it look cool, right? So to me, that is absolutely essential to take your time. There it is. It's starting to come in, and I'll have it done. No problem. I'll do it in layers. I'll let it dry, and I'll do another layer. Time for some gold. Now, normally I highlight all the areas with brown before I do gold, but this is just an experiment of just doing straight gold. So it's something different. You have the option. Usually, again, you can go and, but since I was actually in a bit of a press for time here, I just went straight gold to see if it would make much of a difference. It makes some difference because when you paint gold and you don't have that layer of brown underneath, if you miss just the slightest section, it's going to show. You got to see that big old blue scratch in the middle of your gold, and it's going to completely ruin the illusion that you're going for, that this is a realistic miniature. So you just have to be careful. You can do several layers of gold and go over it without doing the brown, but it's always safer to do the brown first before doing the gold. Look how controlled my hand is as well. Some people say they have shaky hands when they paint models. Well, what you need to do is brace yourself. You see how I'm leaning my hand against that pill bottle, then leaning the pill bottle against my other hand, and I'm tucking my arms in, so this way I am actually restricting the motions. Normally, I have pretty shaky hands, and to combat this, I just, again, brace myself so this way I paint. And if I have to paint something extra small, then I only paint on the exhales. Only on the exhales. Your body moves a little bit less when you exhale. A little bit of motion can make a big difference when you're painting something so small. Now these Retributors have a lot more gold accents on it than all the other Stormcast Eternals that I painted so far. So they have the most amount of golds, which make me leery because at first I was kind of intimidated by doing so much gold. I never painted anything gold in itself, and I can only imagine what it would be like if I painted the entire Stormcast Eternals gold. And some people think it would be easy, but I've never done it before, really. I messed around with gold accents, but never to this degree, never so much, and I never painted a miniature mostly gold, and I was kind of afraid that it would look fake. And for a while, I thought it started looking not realistic. And then I thought maybe it was the brown, that I didn't go into the brown, but it wasn't that. I just really needed the paint to dry completely before I get that cool factor. Like everything kind of needs to settle in towards the end, and paint does that. It kind of dulls out over time. Like if I paint something and I wait a week or two, that's when it really starts settling in and things just really start coming together. Either that or I just get used to the piece. It seems like it though. It seems like everything is coming together slowly but surely after the paint settle for a while. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is the axe hammer. I'm doing the hammer in gold as well. Notice how much paint I have on the brush itself. It's not going to the ferrule, it's just half, and I'm just hitting it in light strokes. Now I'm using the tip of the brush, which means that the tip is going to start curling after a while, and you see that there, it's starting to curl. Now this is what a lot of people have a problem with, their brush curling, and it's like, why is my brush curling? Usually if you can help it at all points in times, you got to start using more of the sides of the brush and instead of the tip of the brush. The second you jab the tip of the brush somewhere else, you got to see curling starting to occur. Jabbing is not good for your paint brushes unless it's a actually stippling brush, and then there, go for it. Okay, going back to the hammer, you can see that in that pale burnt metal on top. I'm going with the gold accent for that celestial Stormcast Eternal symbol that I have there of the comet, and I'm doing that in gold to match my prosecutors that I've done. So I really wanted to have that accent and just like a tribute to the rest of the army, so it really just like all comes together. All right, continuing on with the gold, do the hammer in the back as well as the entire like backpack. I don't know what else to call it, reliquary, I have no idea. But I did all that in gold, and now I'm just doing the details of the hammer. Again, now this technique I use is with the pinky. If you notice, the pinky is on the actual cork because it's not as big as a pill bottle. And I use my pinky to stabilize my hand when I'm doing fine detail like that. So using your hand to your advantage to steady your hand is definitely a way to get better brush control. And you want to get really good brush control because then after a while, all this becomes muscle memory, and then you just get to do it so much quicker. It used to take me a month to do one model, and you know, now in like 3 days I can do a model. So, but then again, I've always had a standard that I set upon myself. I was always tough on what I thought was acceptable. Alrighty, so next up, some Sotek Green with some wet blended with some Temple Blue, and I'm gonna wet blend that with some Sky Blue for a highlight and white to the ultra highlight, and I'm just doing a gem effect. It's very, very much pushing the paint back and forward until you're happy, until it kind of looks reflective. I did a highlight of light colors on the upper right hand corner for both of those in the symbol, and it wasn't that hard to do at all. Alright. So next up, what we're going to do is some white, and we're going to paint white on the shoulder pads. Now I tried painting this by hand, and I always had a rough time with white, so I airbrush white now, and it comes out so smooth and rich. And all I do is mask off. You see that little piece of the arm I masked off? If you can't tell what this is a shoulder pad and it had an arm on it. And I'm just trying to get the center pieces because it's going to be surrounded by gold. Let me show you the technique that I use for masking. Now, I use silly putty for masking, and I put it up on, I take a piece out and I just wrap it around like that with my fingers just to get the general idea of where it is. And then I use these clay shapers. You do different designs to do different things and kind of just shove it into the recesses. You don't want to pull it out too thin because then it might pull off. And you don't want it to pull off or to get too thin that it separates. But the rubber clay shapers actually manipulate the silly putty to make precise masking and really just to cover off the places, and it gives you that much more control. Like I said earlier, it's all about the control you have. Is a brush control, this time is clay shaper control. Doesn't matter, you have to have, or at least exercise some semblance of control in order to get better at miniature painting, to get better at assembly, to get better at this. So it's just really important that you maintain that control. Alrighty. So once you got it there, I just got two portions here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to airbrush the white. Here's the next step a lot of people don't use. And I'm just getting really close. Notice getting super close. And that may look like to the south of that, the one closest to me, that's a piece of the arm. That's not a piece of the arm. That's actually poster tack that I put onto a nail that I nailed into the corking, and then I hot glued that to a piece of cardboard, and that's how I make my cork bases for my sub assemblies. That's one way to do it. So really important to have something, it could be anything, even this little quirky invention, to help you hold a sub assembly. And I always paint in sub assemblies. I love to paint in sub assemblies simply because I just have so much greater control, again, of where I'm putting the paint. I can use the airbrush. I don't have to mask for days, and you know, I don't have to kill myself with different kind of layers of masking, and I could just go at it, and I really could reach it with the paintbrush easier. So everything is so beneficial when it comes to masking, when it comes to sub assemblies and working in sub assemblies. It just makes it so much easier, with the exception of there's some splits inside some of the shoulder pads where you're going to have to poster putty that up. Pale Burnt Metal is next. I'm going to do the actual loincloth. Yeah, that's what I'm going to call it. Do the actual loincloth. Yep. This is as simple as it gets, just some pale burnt metal, a little bit of water, a little bit diluted, pretty strong, trying not to clog up any kind of detail, really just trying to get in and trying to have that control. Again, my hand leaning on the pill bottle and then just really tightening up my hand, scrunching it up, so this way I have control. If the brush strokes that I'm using is too quickly, just slow down the brush strokes and take it slowly until you get that muscle memory and you start building that up. And that just comes from, 30, 40 hours on a miniature, and then, it's done. All right, so next up, what you're going to do here is just paint some gold. We're going back to the gold. Again, I did not paint it bootstrap leather. Usually P3 formula bootstrap leather is what I go before I do the gold. And I kind of do like the richness of that. But as long as you're super careful going up to the edge, you can actually just paint the gold. But I do like it. I do like having the brown there, because if I miss a piece, it looks like it's just a shadow of the gold, because brown is usually where you want to go for with gold for the shadows. But it's really starting to come together. You see how all our highlights is there. Now it's time for some Mephiston red. Going back to the loincloth here, and I'm just going to trim that off. That's the color scheme that I chose. You can use that for leather. You could do that in bootstrap leather, and then do some hashes with the bone white to simulate cracks in that leather, and then go for it with a wash, Agrax Earthshade or Seraphon Sepia. And you could go that route, but I decided to go Mephiston red with this one. And it couldn't be easier to actually get this done. I'm using my Citadel brush here. I used to use an old set of Citadel brushes, but I kind of wore them out. And next up, some Drakenhof Nightshade. And I tend to use the same brush for applications of everything. I don't switch brushes too often. I try to just use the same brush for everything until it just dies and I get a new brush at the end, right? Although I have plenty of other brushes. So Drakenhof Nightshade, I'm putting it into the recesses as well. Wherever I thought maybe a shadow would look better. So I'm just going and I'm just going to line those panels with the Drakenhof Nightshade just a little bit, being very careful not to touch any of the gold, but really just framing off the inside of that panel. All right, getting back to the arm. All right, in that arm there, we're going to use some Reikland Fleshade. Reikland Fleshade for the gold itself, and that's going to dull it down. Some people use Reikland Fleshade gloss, and that can help as well. So I don't have Reikland Fleshade gloss, but I mean, if you would like to try it and pick it up, it's supposed to be definitely more reflective. I use this because I kind of want to dull it down just a little bit, and then I'm going to go back with the gold and just like bring it back up to that shiny level and just have little bits of it like dulled out. This is just what I wanted to go for. It's my personal choice, it's my personal taste. You can do yours however you like. There's no restriction, there's no just one formula to do it. This is how I do it. All right, next up, some bone white, and again some first some white as a base layer, and then we'll hit that with bone white. Yep, just to bring that up, I wanted to make sure that it's not translucent. I wanted to be nice and stark because we're going to add some washes to that as well. So starting off with some white as a base layer for all of the I guess the TP wrapping that comes on for Stormcast Eternals. Really think Stormcast Eternals are pretty cool. I always did. I was just really, it took me 4 years to decide on which faction I wanted to do, which type of Stormcast Eternal I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to do gold. I was tempted to try something with gold, but I didn't kind of want to mess around with the gold. So this just had it. All right, some more Reikland Fleshade. So going back to the Reikland Fleshade and the gold, and just like not overdoing it. And then after I finished the Reikland Fleshade, I hit gold on the tips to bring that gold back up in the color. So Reikland Fleshade and then bringing the gold back up, just leaving the recesses ever so brown. Again, this is where the bootstrap leather does come in when you want to use it as a base before you paint your gold, because brown is that natural yellow-brown combination for gold that actually makes it look a little more realistic, and that's what I like about that. So just going back and forth, and there you go, it's just little touches here and there. But that's just not it. You got to actually take it to the next level. Alright, so next we're going to do this pole arm, so we're going to do some Mephiston red, a wet palette over there, and just blocking that in. I use red, I like the color. You can use leather, you can use any color you want. I just like the red handle. It's just my personal choice to do. I like the way that looks. I've done one for my Storm Wolves and my Space Wolves, I'm sorry, and I think it looks cool. I think for my Wolf Priest, I mean, it really came out well. So I just like that, and I'm just going to replicate that right there. I did pour in a lot more love into the Space Wolves army because I've had that first, and I was really lavishing those. And I will continue to lavish my Space Wolf army as best that I possibly can, again, pushing myself to get improved. I'm actually working on a Knight, and I'm going to take that to a class and see if I can get it into a show. Okay, so now for black. Now you see that I put all the pieces together. Once you work in those sub-assemblies, you put it together. Man, oh man, does that look good. That's just like, that's the hotness right there. And you could always, you know, painting in sub-assemblies, get those areas you can't reach with a brush if you assemble it. Alright, so I'm doing this storm bolt. I have black storm bolts on mine. I just wanted to. I don't know. I definitely wanted to have black storm bolts. That's my thing. That's my jam. You can have gold storm bolts. You don't have to limit it to that. Gold is just fine. But it is just a choice. And again, when painting miniatures, there's a lot of choices to make. And that's a good thing. I mean, some people get overwhelmed by those choices, but really you get to individualize yours. Like Mama's Celestial Vindicators, and not all Celestial Vindicators, if you ever see the paint scheme, have black thunderbolts. But I do. I don't know what I want to call that, but I just think that's nice. And also their tassels, any kind of tassels, they're going to be black as well. And that's just me and what I like. I really like that black contrast right there. The black, the red, the blue. Drakenhof Nightshade coming back in there. It seems like I missed some of the panel linings on the foot, and I'm going to go back in there and just darken up the shadows and creating that shadow underneath each one of those armor panels on the foot itself. And if you ever miss a step, you can always go back. It's not really a big deal. It's fine. It's like happy little accidents that happen, you know, and you just go back and happy little clean it up. For lack of a better terminology there. Panel lining it's good because it actually adds dimension to your miniature and actual visual interest. Sometimes there's things in the model that you don't even know that are there, but your mind picks it up. It's amazing. Sort of like when you take a picture of your model, and when you look at it in a picture, it looks absolutely fabulous. I mean, absolutely fabulous, but then you like zoom in and you're like, what? Right. Because for some reason your eyes don't pick everything up. You don't notice all the details. And think of it like this: if you walk outside and you noticed all the details, you would notice every blade of grass, every car, every screech, every break, every person's eye movement, every person's breathing, every person's teeth when they're smiling. Like, you would notice so much, you get overwhelmed. So your mind kind of like condenses all that and saying, okay, that's a thing. You don't really pick up all the information. Your mind does, but your consciousness doesn't. So that being said, your mind's going to pick up on all these little errors, these visual cues, these visual interests, but you know, your eye may not catch it unless you're looking for it. Now, if you start miniature painting and you've been painting for a while, you know that when you look at somebody else's miniatures, you start figuring out, well, how did they do that? And you start in your mind, so think about the process. Do this, layer this, put a highlight there, put a this, put a that. And you just break it down. It just happens after a while because you played so much time painting up these miniatures. You know how to get these effects. So you kind of like deconstruct somebody else's work to reconstruct it somewhere else. And when I say somewhere else, I mean in the next piece that you do. I always look at great artists, miniature painters, and I always try to deconstruct what they do and reconstruct it in my own mind. So this way I can actually take it home and learn from it. That's why I look at miniatures. That's why I look at other people's miniatures. And seeing them live in competition, man, that's the way to go. Really, really the way to go. Some people like enhance their pictures, up the contrast with their photography. I don't like doing all that stuff. So, you know, seeing it in person, you get the real deal. All right, some black primer and then some gray primer. So the whole thing is in black primer, and then I went for gray primer. You can also go for rock, the color rock from Badger Minotaur. That works well as well. I just did, I wanted a primer because that's what I had handy at the moment. It's just the way it was. Right? I'm just doing a zenithal really quickly. And it really helps. It really is easy to do a base. This one I did some caulking, I did some roller pins from Green Stuff World, and then I started adding a lot to it. Like around the base right there, I put in some wood putty to fill in the gaps so it could look like more of a stone, and then I added like a little tree branch there and a skull, and I added some rocks from road gravel. And you know, I always try to add more and more and more to that base, because you notice your faces, you notice your bases, and you notice your banners when it comes to painting an army. So you really want to go all out in these things, in these aspects. So there it is. I'm going to let that dry up, and once it's dry, here you go. That was a miracle. And right now I'm going to just do the panel lining. On a previous miniature, I just coated the whole thing, and that works well. But this one I decided to show you what panel lining is when it comes to rocks. You see, doing these roller pins, they usually leave gaps in between the rocks, and I just don't want to show. So what I did was I panel lined the actual flagstones, I guess that's what they're called, around all these as blank spaces, you know, just to give it that dimension. So when I paint over it, since acrylic paint, the idea is since acrylic paint is translucent, you actually see darker areas in the recesses, just like that. Could I have painted the entire thing in Drakenhof Nightshade? Absolutely, you could do that and then bring it up later on as you're going to see what I do with the airbrush. But I just wanted to show you there's more than one way to do this. You can actually use a shade to panel line itself, just like I'm doing here. And you don't have to worry about it too much going over the edge, because you're going to paint over it anyway, so it's not really a big deal. All right, so there it is. Now, all this panel line, I put some badger fur now. I'm just hitting the center of the rocks. Now, lower the PSI, so this way the radius of the spray is going to be low. Now, just be careful with dry tip. If you get too dry on the tip, it's going to start sputtering. If you start sputtering, it's really going to wreak havoc, and you're going to have to, you know, start over with some gray primer and bring it back up again. But just as long as you're controlled about it, it'll work really well on you and really up the contrast. You got to see that right there. See it slowly bringing up and really coming to life. It's all about control with an airbrush, knowing where that paint is going to land, and then just working it from there. And short little bursts. Short little bursts is all you need. There it is. Contrast is up. Let's get some color into that. I'm going to use Inktense Wood, sorcery in a bottle, and that's from Scale Color. Love this stuff. Love this intensity set. And you just put it on, and it just, this is what I want wood to look like. Okay, it's done. It's so easy, and you can go places with that, but it's just so good. It's so good. I love it. Put some matte medium in there, dull it out, but I mean, you're good. I love Inktense Wood. If you don't have the intensity set, please pick it up. In fact, Banshee Studios did the artwork for the front of that set right there, and I met him, so that was pretty cool that I got a chance to meet Banshee. And he painted a lot for I mean, he's good at that, man. He's good at a lot of things, really. He said that miniature, actually, for the cover of that, it's all broken up because he actually dropped the miniature and it split like an eggshell, and he put it back together, and then he put it for the cover of it, and he just went with it, and it looks so cool. So that wasn't even intentional the way it came out, but, you know, happy little accidents, right? Look at that wood. Oh my gosh, it's so intense. All right. So next up, what we're going to do is we're going to have some bone white. I'm just going to bring up that skull. You're going to see me just bring it up. I'm going to spot highlight it. No masking, just straight spot highlighting. All about that little control, getting that detail area. Could you paint it with brush? Absolutely. Do I want to spend all the time to do that? Nope. And this way, it has like a little gradient right there. Look at that, shadow into light. It looks great. And no feathering involved. It's the bomb. If you don't have an airbrush, I highly recommend you pick up the tool. It's like finger painting. You finger paint it, and somebody came out with a paintbrush and like, oh, that's a tool. I'm like, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to finger paint. You can, but use a tool, and it's so much better. All right, so Athonian Camoshade is the green color right there. I'm just going to bring up some of the life rocks. I don't want it to be a dead planet. This is kind of alive. And yes, I put shades inside my airbrush, and it just tints things. I love it because it really tints things, and it gets really dull, and it's just perfect. Anytime you want to do like a gradient, I bought all these shades from Citadel, and anytime you want to do a gradient, man, it's just part of my workflow. It just is. And you can bring anything up with that around this area. I just wanted some green because it is Stormcast Eternal, so I don't want it to be dreary and dead all the time. It's not like they're in Shaisha or anything like that. Plus, I'm going for the bottoms of where I have my Shadespire Warband, because they had some green in there and some leaves and foliage. Time for some Wild Rider Red. Now you can substitute the Wild Rider Red for Kador Red Highlight or any orange that you have. I did orange because these are the color leaves that I wanted to do. I wanted to do like a partly fall motif kind of thing. That's just my personal choice. But I like the leaves different color. I wanted to pop. I really wanted some contrasting colors in there. I want you to draw your eye to that. If you go to focus in on the bases, faces, and banners, I want you to look at the bases. I want you to appreciate that. So I'm really taking my time with the bases. Some people don't even do bases, and I think that's an injustice to the miniature itself. This is an opportunity for you to tell a story of where the miniature is actually at. Time for some Evil Sunz Scarlet, a nice little bright red. I'm going to bring that up with another leaf right there. And again, you can use any kind of red you want if you wanted to use red. If you wanted to paint all of these green, you can paint them green. It's up to you. They're leaves. I'm just showing you how I got the effect. Some people ask me, well, how'd you get that? And what color did you use for that? I tell you what color I use for that, but ultimately it's up to you. Ultimately, you have to make the choice of what colors you want to decide, because it's your miniature and nobody's going to look at it except for you unless you show it off. And then people are like, whoa, that's cool. At least I would. If you're not a part of it, now time for the finals of Escorpina Green. So if you're not a part of it, join me at the Miniatures Paintbrush Legion, and that is on Facebook. Just request that you be on there. And we have a lot of members. I invited a lot of top artists in there, and it's just really cool, really community. And if you have any questions, there's a lot of people that are willing to help. And really just check out your stuff. And whenever I have a live show, I'm going to go over to the Miniatures Paintbrush Legion, and I'm going to like try to post up what I see in there. So if we get a couple of members in there, I'd like to showcase your work on the live shows when I give those as well. All right, so we're just about done here. Cleaning out the brush a little bit, and I'm just going to do a little bit of that green. I think it's olive drab or some kind of darker green when I want to go to. And that's about it. Well, check out the pictures, and I'll see you on the outro. Well, there you have it. The Stormcast Eternal Retributors ready for my army. Well, if you like this video, like, share, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on the Miniatures Paintbrush.